If we don't pay, are you still going to protect us? I said, absolutely not. They couldn't believe the answer.
I know it's become quite fashionable in some circles to disregard the global interests we have as a global power. This is the idle work for idle minds, and it has no place in the United States Senate.
Former President Donald Trump is drawing criticism for his rhetoric against NATO, including from top Republicans within his party. Trump said in a statement over the weekend that Russia should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do to members of NATO who do not pay their spending targets. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is pushing back against Trump's criticism. And in fact, he said that the rhetoric undermines all of our security, including the United States, and puts American and European soldiers at increased risk. But while Trump was able to kill the bipartisan border bill, Republicans bucked him on advancing a $95 billion foreign aid package in the Senate. The aid, of course, is for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. Joining us now with the latest is The Hill's White House reporter, Brett Samuels. Brett, Trump is going after NATO at a time when lawmakers are still negotiating, mind you, the foreign aid. So what's the White House saying to this?
Yeah, so what the White House has been telling me and what the Biden campaign has been saying is essentially they view this as dangerous rhetoric. They view it as what one White House aide called unhinged rhetoric. So they clearly view this as both threatening to the U.S. national security goals, but also just unbecoming of somebody who's running for president.
So specifically with NATO, of course, what Trump's referring to directly impacts Article 5 in the NATO alliance. So in the NATO Accords, in Article 5, it states that an attack on one member is an attack on all. Obviously, this mattered post 9/11. So, Brett, my question is, does this undermine Article 5? Does Trump's rhetoric undermine Article 5?
What White House officials have told me, what you heard from the NATO Secretary General, is absolutely this is a threat to Article 5. This is essentially posing a risk not only to NATO allies of the United States, but could in the long term pose a threat to U.S. forces that are a part of NATO, essentially where Trump is more or less welcoming Russia to attack a NATO ally, which could then in turn draw U.S. forces in through Article 5. So the White House views this as dangerous. They view it as dangerous not just to allies in Europe, but to potentially to U.S. forces on the ground who are part of NATO.
All right, so Trump has influence on the border, but apparently not on foreign aid. Is the White House confident that Congress is going to approve the funding request?
So the question with that, I think, comes down to the House, because what we've heard from the White House, what White House officials have told me, is that the Senate is where the White House is comfortable negotiating. They believe they have support in the Senate. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has sort of indicated that he is aligned with the White House on this in aid for Ukraine, aid for Israel, and sort of flexing U.S. power on the global stage. But in the House, where Republicans control the House, that's less clear. You've heard a lot of skepticism about aid for Ukraine. And so that's where I think the White House is really going to have to see if they can rally some kind of coalition to get this through and get this to the president's desk.
All right, that's on policy. Now we dive into politics, and heading on over to the Decision Desk HQ. A new ABC News Ipsos poll says that 86% of Americans think that Biden is too old to run for president. Not good, given the presser last week, of course, but meanwhile, also not good for Trump. 66% of Americans thinks that Trump should not be immune to criminal prosecution for actions that he took while in office. So how is voter sentiment impacting what the candidates are saying on the campaign trail?
It's interesting because, to your point, it's sort of two things that their respective candidates are having a hard time attacking the other person for, in a sense, because, former President Trump, he doesn't necessarily want to go after Biden on the issue of age specifically because Trump himself is 77. Instead, he's tried to make this about competence. He's tried to say Biden is incompetent, has always been incompetent, but he doesn't want to make this a matter of age because that could then boomerang back on Trump. On the flip side, when it comes to the indictments, this is something that Biden himself has been weary of stepping in, making it seem like he's wading into these Justice Department matters and tipping the scales. But you're seeing that these are two things where these candidates are both vulnerable, and they're going to continue to be vulnerable through November because Biden can't change his age, and Trump can't change the fact that he's facing these charges in 4 different jurisdictions.
Well, meanwhile, you've got RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's apologizing to his family. A little bit awkward when your family is watching the Super Bowl and sees an advertisement invoking President JFK's campaign. And Bobby Shriver, he's the son of JFK's sister, Eunice Kennedy, blasted the ad saying that the Kennedys do not support RFK's position on vaccines. But the Democrats are nervous about RFK, are they not? Because they think that RFK is going to take votes from Biden and tilt the election for Trump.
For sure, there's this concern that RFK Jr., and you saw it in the ad that ran during the Super Bowl, the ad is basically just flashing the Kennedy name over and over and over again. And that's something that is far more likely to resonate with Democrats, to potentially pull disaffected Democrats away from Biden. And, as we saw in 2016, just a small sliver of Democrats who might vote for a third-party candidate, whether it be RFK Jr. or someone else, that could make all the difference in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, which Biden really needs to win and hold on to if he wants to win re-election in 2024.
Well, and you've got RFK's camp saying that essentially this is just another example of the DNC trying to stop him, is it?
I think it's honestly hard to make the argument that the DNC is trying to stop RFK because, he has not really put in a lot of organization, a lot of effort to get on the ballot in the way that we've seen, for example, No Labels has actually been pretty successful in getting on the ballot in a lot of states. And so instead, you're seeing RFK Jr. explore the idea of running as a libertarian candidate, running as an independent candidate. So, I think that's sort of a hollow argument that the DNC is trying to stop him. But that doesn't mean that the DNC isn't concerned and isn't keeping this in the back of their head that RFK Jr. is really a genuine threat to Biden's chances at re-election.
Everybody's talking about RFK this morning as a result of that Super Bowl ad. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was hospitalized in critical care over the weekend at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Secretary Austin transferred his duties to Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks. How long is Secretary Austin going to be hospitalized, and how is this impacting the Defense Department?
So, the answer as far as how long he'll be hospitalized, no one really knows at this point. As you said, he's in the critical care unit. Could be a few days, could be longer, but no one has really given a firm timeline on that. Now, as you mentioned, this is a much different scenario from when he was hospitalized around the start of the new year, when the White House didn't know for several days. The public was kept in the dark for several days. The Pentagon clearly learning their lesson in that sense and publicizing this right away. But already we've seen Secretary Austin was supposed to travel to Brussels for a conference to talk about Ukraine aid. That conference is now taking place virtually. His deputies will take the lead on that. So already we're seeing sort of the trickle-down impacts of Secretary Austin's latest hospitalization here.
Brett Samuels, The Hill's White House reporter. Good stuff. Thank you for coming on, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
It feels almost unreal.
They are surrounded by the family now, and the family that they haven't seen for the 128 days.
Those are the families of two Israeli hostages who were extracted from Gaza overnight. The Israeli Defense Force conducted a daring operation in the southern city of Rafah last night, successfully rescuing 60-year-old Fernando Simon Marman and 70-year-old Louis Har, who were both taken 128 days ago during Hamas's October 7th terror attack. According to the Israeli military, its forces did come under fire from Hamas. The Palestine Red Crescent Society said Monday that Israel continued its shelling of Rafah, killing more than 100 people. Already, more than 1.3 million people are believed to be in Rafah, per the United Nations, and to date, just more than 28,000 people have died in Gaza as a result of the Israel-Hamas war. The House will attempt a redo of the vote to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The lower chamber is set to hold a vote on Tuesday after an embarrassing first vote failed to oust the DHS chief. The GOP is positive that this time they're going to have enough votes because House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, he was unable to cast his vote in the first round due to a medical reason, but he's going to be back and is expected to attend the vote and to vote yay on that impeachment. A special election to replace disgraced New York Congressman George Santos will take place on Tuesday. Voters in the state's 3rd congressional district will cast their vote in the high-stakes election that will decide the fate of an already Republican slim majority in the House. Former Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi is pitted against Republican Nassau County legislator Mazi Pilip, according to a Newsday Siena College poll. And Swazi is up by 4 percentage points. Regardless of the outcome, it is definitely going to have an impact on the GOP effort to impeach DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and, of course, President Joe Biden. Did you see the Super Bowl? It was an awesome game. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs for beating the San Francisco 49ers. It was a heck of a game. I thought Usher did a great job on rollerblades during the halftime show. I also loved Reba McEntire's rendition of the national anthem. Awesome game. But this is the Hill, and of course, we have to talk about the politics of it. I know. And this year, both former President Donald Trump as well as President Biden duked it out on social media. Trump posting on Truth Social just before kickoff that Swift should not endorse Biden. He wrote, "There's no way she could endorse crooked Joe Biden." He went on to add, "Besides that, I like her boyfriend Travis, even though he may be a liberal and probably can't stand me." This year, the big game, of course, was plagued by bizarre conspiracy theories, some saying that Swift and Travis Kelce were some type of psyops, but at the end of the day, they were not. And I still don't really understand the thinking on that conspiracy theory. Either way, President Biden taking to X after the win and writing, quote, "just like we drew it up," end quote. That's it for today's Daily Debrief. My name is Kevin Cirilli. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.